Steelcase Global Report recently shared our findings from employees around the world wanting to be back in the office and what are they looking for as they come to the office. 65% of respondents are looking for more collaboration in the office versus working from home and having more virtual sessions. Hi, I'm Samantha Jam and I'm with Larissa Murphy, co-founder of Dare Design. And today we're going to talk more about collaboration at work. Hi Larissa, thanks for joining us.
Hi Samantha, nice to be here today.
Yeah, great to see you. And tell us a little bit more about Dare Design.
Well, Dare Design is sort of the brainchild of myself and my business partner, Ivy Chim. We set it up 7 years ago, but when we first set it up, it was called Contrast Design. The reason we set it up called Contrast is we wanted to set ourselves apart and be in contrast to everything that was being done in workplace at the time. And our vision was to create workplaces that are employee experience driven, so that everything we do and everything we design is in response to an employee's needs. Having done that for 6 or so years as Contrast, we decided that during the pandemic, it wasn't enough just to be in contrast, to do things differently, to propose a different approach to workplace design. So we have just rebranded as Dare Design. The reason being that we feel that we have to dare to push things further, dare to challenge employers to create better workplaces for their employees.
That's great to hear. And I think this is a great moment to be daring and inspiring in thinking about your workplace. We hear clients are re-engineering their policies as, whether you need to come to the office or not. But we're definitely hearing from all our clients about the fatigue of, virtual collaboration, or how everybody had, they just want to be back in the office to have that meeting instead of yet another session on Zoom or Teams, whichever medium you use. And we're all feeling the difficulties of that nature of collaboration if it's solely virtual. Are you hearing or seeing some of this from your clients?
Yes, I think everybody has a bit of Zoom fatigue, and I think there are many contributing factors to this. I think the whole idea of virtual collaboration was kind of thrust on us, unplanned, unorganized, and unstructured. It was because we needed to, but actually that can be a great accelerator for change. I think up to that point we had many meetings, and I think we're also seeing many employees stating that they feel that they're more productive working from home, that it has many sort of life balance benefits to working from home. So there is this balancing act that we have to achieve, and that same balancing act in terms of creating environments or employment that employees actually enjoy and want to participate in, we have the same balancing act with virtual interaction and collaboration and physical interaction and collaboration. We have to achieve a balance. So I think there are many people grappling with this right now, both in terms of workplace policy and in terms of workplace design. I think many of our spaces in offices have not been designed well to facilitate and support digital collaboration as well as physical collaboration. They seem to have been envisioned as two separate kind of entities, and we need to pull that together.
Absolutely, and I think we are hearing more purposeful design meeting spaces, collaborative spaces, and more purposeful about integrating technology. Whilst many of us use, collaborative software like Mural and so on, especially if you're not in the same office. Ultimately, even if you were in the office, you might still need to collaborate with a remote worker or a team member. And what are some of the challenges that you see around designing for that mixed presence experience?
I think the problem with mixed presence experience is that we're not fully well versed in it from a commercial office workplace standpoint in terms of design. And it's all driven by experience. And the problem we have right now is that people are physically in the office collaborating, and that is one experience. If someone is digitally collaborating online, that is a different experience. And when you bring the mixed presence together, you have a group of people that are sharing two very different experiences. And part of that problem is physical space, because the people who are remote can't engage in the same way in the physical space as the people who are physically present. I think when you look at a lot of the software and digital software that's provided for, online collaboration, it's branded as that identity. And so your experience is Microsoft, Zoom, whatever product it is you're using. Your experience is not the experience of the company you're working for. Whereas if you're physically present, your experience is your physical office, which has been designed with company brand, identity, culture in mind. Well, hopefully it has. So I think we have to look to other forms of inspiration to address this. I think one good source of information would be retail, because retail has gone through this transformation a long time ago. In the past we had physical stores and people shopped physically. Then we had online retail, but it wasn't quite so successful. But there have been many leaps forward so that companies can align the experience of physically shopping and digitally shopping, so it is the same experience. So the Apple Store online is the same as the Apple Store in town. The experience is the same. And that's what we need to do. We need to curate experiences, both physical and digital, that are aligned. So that means that designers like us and product retailers like you have to design products that allow and facilitate that to happen.
I think that's such an interesting parallel, as you mentioned, between designing for the consumer business and the retail world and the office. In another session today, we talked about how social spaces are learning from hospitality, hotels and restaurants. And when you think about retail today, a lot of companies talk about how to be omni-channel, be where the consumer is. And I think your reference back to the office is wherever the teams want to collaborate, they should have a great experience, whether it's at home or in a cafe or in the office. I think that's the challenge that we all have to live up to. And that's where I think the word you've used, to dare to change and to dare to experiment, because you may not get it right the first day. It's really a great moment for workplace design, and sort of innovation awaits us in terms of what's next.
Yes. I think for me specifically, I've been in the industry of workplace design for over 20 years, and I don't think I've ever been as excited as I am now about the potential we have to transform workplaces that really haven't changed for the last 100 years. To transform them into something new that supports us. But this is hand in hand with the changes that are happening in society. And the workplaces of the future are not going to be like those of the past. That is certain. The way we want to work, the needs we have, the purpose of the office, it has changed beyond recognition, and we need to address that in how we design them. I think that's really, really important for us. And as you mentioned, collaboration is a huge part of that. Also is the shift away from productivity and towards creativity. That will also channel how we used to work. Productivity is best served with individual work styles, with people working in isolation, peace, quiet, and focus. Creativity requires a mixture of different work styles. Most great ideas happen in isolation, so people need to have the space and ability to isolate, whether that's at home, in a park, in a cafe, wherever is comfortable for them is great. But then they also need to test their ideas. And to test their ideas, people have to come together. And if your ideas relate to what it is you do as your mode of work, then that really becomes a purpose for the workplace. And it's a shift away from just accommodating the tools and implements that people need to do their work, to a space where people can come to test their ideas and to create and to innovate and to push things forward. So that leads to a much different type of setup. I think, and it's also about balance. It's about balance of giving people space for individual work.
I like what you say about people coming to the office to prototype and test. That's something you can't do virtually. Leaving ideas on the whiteboard, and we all know collaboration is not a waterfall, linear process. It can be chaotic, it can be stop-start, and so I think having a space that supports that would be great. I think you mentioned your your experience in the workplace dates back, a decade. And if you look at a decade ago, when we look at collaboration was equal to meeting rooms or boardrooms with 20 people in it, to today where we've gone the other spectrum where collaboration was happening a lot in the open, and then you have pushback, pre-COVID period about noise in the open area. And then again, where do you see design kind of reconciling between the traditional and the far side of that spectrum? Do you see more shifts towards either side of that spectrum?
I don't think it really matters whether collaboration is in the open or in the enclosed space. Different purposes may require different environments. And the nature of the collaboration you're doing may require a different environment. That's why I find things like these, things on wheels, great. Because this gives employee choice. An employee can decide, I want to stand at a high bench and I want to collaborate with somebody who's remote, so I need a big screen. But my colleague wants to sit, so they can sit. It gives them choice and flexibility. Anything on wheels is good for that. There are other situations where people are discussing something sensitive, especially in innovation. It might be a very sensitive matter, an idea that they don't want their competitors getting hold of, or people outside the small group of people working on it knowing about. And so then they need enclosures. So I think both types of collaboration are still relevant, and I don't think there's a swing one way or the other. I think what actually happened was when society changed, when technology liberated us from being tied to a desk, when the nature of work we were doing was demanding that we become more creative and less obsessed with productivity and output, that changed how we needed to interact. And I think everyone just jumped on a bandwagon of, the solution is collaboration. And we must just fling collaboration spaces into our offices, left, right, and center, so that we can tick the box and say we provide them. But most of the collaboration spaces that were provided in offices for the last 10 years were inappropriately designed. Not the product necessarily, but the positioning, the location. There was just a lack of understanding of the employee experience of how to use these spaces. And it was almost like they're on the plan, tick the box, they're there. There's an awkward space, we don't know what else to put in it, put a collaboration space there. But that's not designed for purpose. So I think there's been a decade of that. And then, of course, there was pushback of saying, well, this space doesn't work. I can't use it the way I want to. So, now I think people are realizing that it has to start with the experience we're trying to create. What do people, and that experience has to be driven by what do people actually need? And now we have to ask the question, what are people going to come to the office for? Because people don't have to anymore.
I think that's so interesting. I think never before that all of us as individuals are so sensitive to our work experience. Whether you feel productive or you're able to focus at home or at work. And you also all of us have personal experiences of how collaboration worked for us. And so I think for everybody, there's ever more increasing attention into what worked and what didn't work. And this is a great moment for the voice of the employee to feed into what really worked and not. I think in the past, maybe employees didn't understand why there were surveys or there were observations. And now I think many people are able to speak more directly and feedback more purposefully into what they need.
I think not. I think we're still too limited in that. I think most workplaces are designed without any wide-scale consultation of employees, and that's what we set DARE up to do. I think also, when you do consult and when you do engage with employees, the reason that is because most employees will have a frame of reference of what they have now. And they'll tell you what is good about it, what is bad about it, what they like and what they don't like. But they don't necessarily have the imagination to think of what is possible. And so many of the surveys that are sent out to engage employees to understand what they think they need and want, etc., don't challenge. They simply say, do you want this or this? Do you like this or dislike this? Is this better or worse? So they're all based in the same comfortable frame of reference for employees of what they have now. But until we push the boundary and until we engage with employees on a level where we challenge them and say, why does this work for you? What makes it better than this? Until we start really challenging and suggesting and saying, well, what about this idea? It's a bit out there. You've never tried it. Can you imagine what it would be like to do this? How would that work for you? Until we start having those conversations at an individual level with individual employees, then we can really say we're engaging properly. I think too much of the engagement that's being done is a questionnaire with kind of yes/no answers, and it doesn't really determine what the needs of the employees are or the potential for what we could do. And that's why, like I said, we're being quite daring and saying, no, this shouldn't be driven by a real estate team with their infinite knowledge of what's going to work for people or not work for people, because the answer is you don't know until you ask. And asking is not enough. You must challenge those responses. It must be a conversation that is ongoing. And like you said, it doesn't always get right. You put it in place for one person and they're happy with this setup, but the next person who comes along to use it doesn't like it and wants the TV over here, and wants some privacy and they want a whiteboard, So I think these kind of ideas of things that are mobile and flexible and able to move so that employees can actually configure the space the way they want to use it are going to be so important going forward.
Absolutely. I think control, giving teams and individuals control over their own space, hack their own space, make it your own, reoccurring themes that we heard as well. I think one opportunity, if you will, that gives clients a moment to be more daring is also the luxury of space. Are you hearing that if, in the past and when we don't have the real estate because everybody had assigned workstations, they needed a certain dimension of space and so on and so forth, and they did not have sufficient real estate for them to test out and prototype these ideas. Are you feeling or hearing that this is shifting, that is more real estate being freed up to be experimental?
I don't think it's that we need more real estate freed up. I think it's the way we perceive and use space that needs to change. I think in the past, we had a series of ratios, and client, and especially real estate people, were very attached to these ratios because even buildings were designed around them. 1 person per 10 square meters. That will provide enough space. How much space do we need? Calculate based on 1 person per 10 square meters. That tells you how much space you need for this office. And then it was kind of carving that space up as to how many square meters were going to meeting rooms, to collaboration, to social space, to private workspace. And it was all, again, based on ratios. Are we going with a 60-40%? What is the occupancy level? What is the desk sharing ratio? Ratios, numbers. Sorry, we're humans, okay? And it's not fixed. We keep changing and we keep evolving. And as those evolutions and shifts become faster and, more aggressive, you have to stop working based on these ratios. And you have to start building around what do people need? What do people want? What will they want in the future? How do we determine that? By engaging, by challenging. Once we get some answers, then we have to build in flexibility to allow the space to adapt and change and move to suit people's needs as they evolve. So I think we have to get away from the numbers game. And I think it doesn't matter whether an office is 1,000 square meters or 10,000 square meters or 100,000 square meters or several 100,000 square meters. We need to work with the employees that work in that space and create flexibility, choice, and allow employees to have control over the space they occupy. Whether or not that will result in a shrinkage, for some companies maybe. They may not need as much space because their employees may say, I actually prefer working at home. The nature of my work is better suited to that. I only need to come to the office 1 day a week. Other teams may say, no, it's hopeless working from home. We need the face-to-face. We need to be in the office all the time. Everyone is different. We're all unique. And that's why I think we need much more intensive engagement. It's going to be hard for companies to adjust to that. It's all about engagement, employee experience, and flexibility, building in flexibility and choice.
There's really no one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach. And even if you would, the same organization in different countries, you may have different needs as well as the local teams and needs, as you mentioned, are differing. And on collaboration and well-being, we talked a little bit about 10 years ago. We had meeting rooms that had 20 people in it, and in the early days of COVID, there was some research, and by many different companies, we talked about those enclosed room with 20 people in a room where you might catch something new from others. It's There is less and less desire for this type of rooms, and there was of course research that collaboration is better in a small group and more likely in a small group. And do you see this swing between those type of large meeting rooms towards a smaller footprint?
I mean, again, it depends on the organization and the nature of work that's being undertaken by people. But we have a data analytics system that we use and we deploy in clients' spaces. And it allows us to track people's behavior and the way they work and the spaces that they're using. And then what we saw, fortunately we have clients where we've been tracking pre-COVID, during COVID, and now after COVID. And it's been really insightful to see how employees' use of space has changed over that period of time. What we have and the data we have to date shows is that desk usage has plummeted completely. Individual space, I mean, what you sit at a desk to do, people probably prefer to do sitting at their dining room table at home or at their desk at home. I've heard from many friends, not even in the industry, I have a nice chair, a nice desk at home, much nicer than what they give me in the office. Why would I go to the office to sit in that? So desk usage has during COVID, obviously when no one was going to the office, it completely fell off a cliff. What we did see actually, which was interesting, that despite lower occupancy levels, there was a significant increase in usage of collaborative space and open collaborative space. But I think that was in part to what you just mentioned, that people didn't come to the office at all, and if they did come to the office, it was to interact with somebody. And because of COVID, there was a fear of being in an enclosed space with somebody. And so that is why there was a spike in the use of open collaborative spaces during COVID, despite an overall reduction in office occupancy. And then post-COVID, what we're seeing is that's kind of balancing out. The desk utilization is not coming back. But meeting rooms are coming up again, and collaboration spaces are dropping off again compared to the peak they were at when we were during COVID. So I think what that suggests is that many organizations, their open collaboration spaces, don't have the digital connectivity in place to allow multi-presence interaction. So that's why I think the meeting room usage is going up, because they have TV screens, they have the webcams and so on. And if you have a group of people, you don't want them all sitting at a desk in the office dialing into the same call. You gather them together. The meeting room has a camera and TV set up to do that, but the open collaboration does not.
Yeah, that's so interesting how technology in some way has limited collaboration in the open space. That it's a common social etiquette now that everybody puts their camera on, and whether you are in situ or joining remotely. So that's really interesting and an area to watch, whether those teams might toggle between more enclosed and more in the open, and how many companies are looking at to providing that diversity of spaces for employees to choose from. So Larissa, tell us what's keeping you busy, what's new, and what's next for their design.
Well, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to push boundaries. And we want to challenge the status quo with workplace design. And part of being able to push boundaries is a lot to do with education and information. I also think that we ourselves need to look at collaboration, and we need to collaborate with professionals outside the real estate realm. I personally myself do a lot of collaboration with organizational psychologists. And I think this is the way forward for workplace, because if we're really going to start talking about designing and curating workplaces to create optimum human experience, we have to define what that optimum human experience is for each organization and for each individual within that organization. And that requires a degree of psychology. I don't think people in the real estate world are familiar with that. They're much more familiar with the numbers game and the ratios, and this is very alien for them. So I think at DARE we're really going to push that agenda. We also want to become much more daring and challenging. To work with us means we are going to challenge you. We're going to push you out of your comfort zone. We're going to make you think about possibilities rather than just replicating what you have now or a kind of improved version of it.
That's really exciting, and we look forward to hearing more from you. do you see in your projects and the personas of the type of clients who are early adopters or futurists or progressive, you want to describe them? Are there certain attributes that you're looking for?
Yes, what we're finding is the people who are willing to think like this are the people who are in a difficult situation. And we're seeing the technology industry here in Singapore, especially the fintech industry, where the competition for talent is enormous. So to attract and retain people is very challenging. On top of that, once you attract them and retain them, because most of the work they do is technological, they can do it from anywhere. And we are seeing many organizations who understand the benefit of people coming to the office to collaborate, to innovate, to test ideas, and especially for that kind of developmental tech, advancement work. So they really come to us and say, how do we make our workplace more appealing and attractive to employees so that they want to spend time here? And so those are really the clients that we work with, because they're starting to think. It's not about creating a workplace and having an organization that says, this is our workplace, as an employee you must come here. It's about organizations who say, we want to employ you, we want you to embrace our culture, we want you to become part of the team, we want you to love working with us so that you stay. So what is the sort of space that you want to spend time in? Where do you want to work? How do you want to work? How can we create a space that you love and love spending time in? And so that's a real transformation in terms of the shift of power from, an employer organization and their real estate team dictating what the workplace is going to be like, to completely employee-driven design. Like, we've just done a project where it is entirely employee-driven design. The real estate team were sidelined. Even the senior management were sidelined, where we took entire direction from workshops we held with employees, and it's been completely curated as an employee-driven workspace.
Thanks, Larissa, for joining us today, and it's so exciting to hear your vision for their design and what might be next for the studio. And thanks for sharing us with all these interesting tips about how to design for better collaboration at work.